Welcome back to Talks in Class. I am your host, Jenna, and I'm excited for another week of time travel and unlocking some memories. So thank you for joining me today. First of all, I have to apologize if my voice sounds a little raspy or just off. I'm coming off of being sick for a few days. I spent the first half of this week almost entirely in bed. I literally sat in bed for almost 3 full days, and I was going a little bit crazy. I just had some sort of head cold or some sort of upper respiratory thing, and I was feeling really, really tired. So I spent a lot of time binging television. I was watching some old TV. I mostly watched Entourage and old Vanderpump Rules, like the first season of Vanderpump Rules. I love watching old TV. Did you guys watch Entourage when it was on? Because I haven't watched it since the 2000s, but I loved that show so much. I actually still own the entire series on DVD. It's at my mom's house, but I have the whole thing on DVD. I loved it. I don't know why I loved it so much, but I really loved it. I thought it was really fun. And watching it now, it aged not so well. They are very problematic characters, most of them, but it's very 2000s, and it makes me realize that the 2000s were, in fact, a long time ago. Sometimes I feel like maybe it wasn't that long ago, but the show started in 2004. And in the first season, there is this storyline where E dates Ari's assistant, Emily, and she asks him out the first time they go out, not the other way around. And the guys give E such a hard time about it. It's like a whole thing. And it's like, would anybody really have cared about that in 2004? But they probably would. It was a different time. You know, the world really has changed in a lot of ways, and I think sometimes it's easy to forget that until you see an example like that really contrasts the way that I feel like things are in the present. And the whole show kind of feels like that. It's definitely a product of its time, for sure, but I still really have enjoyed watching it. Turtle and Drama are so funny. I loved them when I watched it the first time, and they still are so funny. And it's like I said, it's just such a snapshot of the 2000s. It's so 2000s. The fashion, they use a lot of pop music in it, and of course it takes place in LA, and I love how they have so many celebrities come on the show to play themselves. So it's just like this who's who of Hollywood in the mid 2000s, and there's a lot of references to current things that were talked about and kind of happening in Hollywood and pop culture. So I love that. It's really great. It's nice for sparking some memories for sure. And then Vanderpump Rules, you guys. I don't want to take too much time on this, but let me tell you, if you're a reality TV person, the first 2 or maybe even 3 seasons of Vanderpump Rules are really up there with season 2 of Laguna Beach, which I think is pretty much perfect reality television. Like, it's so good. Bravo really struck gold with early seasons, Stassi and Jax. Like, that drama is so good. And it's right out the gate, too. You don't have to wait around for things to happen. Like, they have drama immediately. And Kristen, when she used to live with Sandoval, it's gold. It really, really is. And the fashion is so unbelievably early 2010s. There's so much neon. So I highly recommend giving it a rewatch. Even if you've never watched it, it's just good for the nostalgia now because it is 10 years old now. I signed up for Peacock just so I could watch Vanderpump Rules, and it is worth every penny of that $5 a month subscription fee. But I am feeling better. I'm out of bed. I am not binging television today. It feels amazing. Just very, very happy to be over the worst of it, at least. So that really is my what good happened this week, because not really much else happened. So I'm just happy to be feeling better. I'm very excited about this week's conversation, actually. We are going back to the Y2K era once again. This week, to talk about one of the most important time periods in my adolescence, which was the boy band / TRL era. But before we get into that very exciting conversation, a reminder that spring is hopefully on its way. Here in LA, it's going to be almost 80 degrees today, so I'm definitely feeling spring. But the stores are starting to put out all their spring clothes, and whenever I see a season change coming, like the first sign of it in stores, I always feel excited and kind of inspired to make some changes and updates to my wardrobe for the new season. So the new season is a great time to try out clothing rental. I'm telling you guys, it's so fun to get new clothes multiple times a month, knowing that I didn't actually buy those new clothes and I can just send them back whenever I'm done. It's like the thrill of online shopping without the commitment of online shopping. If you're watching on video, this pink button down is actually one of the things that I have rented recently and I'm really loving it. It's just a little bit springy, but it's still, long sleeved. Little touch of spring, if you will. So if you are new to the idea of clothing rental and it seems a little weird to you, all of the clothes are professionally cleaned and inspected by an actual human being before they're sent out again. So you really are getting items that are completely ready to wear right away. And I like that too because I can rent things that are like weird fabrics or dry clean only stuff, which I usually avoid actually buying because I know I'm not going to take it to the dry cleaner. And I can wear it and then just send it back because I know that they're going to clean it. You can give it a try completely free at jennabarclaystylebox.com. Just click get started and that first month will automatically be free. It'll be applied at checkout, no code needed. Give it a try and let me know what you think. Okay, so let's go back in time and talk about boy bands. Boyband Mania, the boy band era, if you will. First, let me set the scene for you because we need to be fully immersed in this situation. It's 1997. You're sitting in your room on your bright blue pearlized inflatable chair, chatting with your BFF on the phone while you listen to your local top 40 radio station. Your phone is probably clear plastic, or if you're like me, a lip-shaped phone that you got at Spencer's. You look in the corner and your purple lava lamp is casting a nice glow on your Spice Girls poster. You open up a little tiny bottle of glitter bonbons nail polish while you balance the house phone on your shoulder and you're going to paint your nails when suddenly you hear it. You hear those opening notes to As Long As You Love Me by the Backstreet Boys. You slam down your bonbons, you and your bestie scream into the phone at the same time, you crank your radios up. You both scream the words into the phone together loudly at the tops of your lungs until both of your moms come and tell you to keep it down. Life is good. If that little scene just transported you through time and space, we're on the same page here. We were both there. We both experienced the same life, the same thing. If not, you're welcome to follow along, to listen along to this podcast. But I'm just telling you, that's the starting point, okay? That's where we were at. In the late 90s, through about Y2K, I would say, the year 2000, boy bands, or just pop music in general, ruled our lives. It ruled our whole worlds. And my age just corresponded perfectly with this whole boy band mania because it just so happened that I was the perfect age to be taken absolutely hostage by these boy bands. When I think back to kind of the pop boom, the pop era of Y2K, I think the Spice Girls was the first example of this because they were the first super poppy sounding group, super poppy feeling group that became a massive phenomenon. And I feel like that was around 1996, at least for me. When the Spice Girls hit the scene, I mean, we didn't even know what to do with ourselves. Girls around my age didn't have anything before that to like latch onto. I feel like in music especially, maybe Mariah Carey is probably the only other example that I can think of a musical artist that we were able to grasp onto as fans the way we did with the Spice Girls. I mean, we lost our minds. I was so obsessed with the Spice Girls that I used our family's entire ink cartridge for the printer, printing out pictures of them from these weird fan sites that I found on Ask Jeeves or Webcrawler or whatever primitive search engines we had back then, and I would tape them all over my bedroom. And at the same time, the Backstreet Boys, I feel like, were having some of their earliest hits, but they hadn't really hit the scene yet. I did some Googling, and I was actually shocked to see that the Backstreet Boys' first US radio hit was in 1995, and it was We've Got It Going On. What a great song. I forgot all about that song. I definitely remember it, but I don't remember being aware of the Backstreet Boys as a band just yet. To me, it feels like they started gaining popularity around the same time as the Spice Girls, but they wouldn't become a full-on phenomenon the way that the Spice Girls were for at least another couple of years. And then in 1997, we got MMMBop by Hanson. Tween girls, I mean, if we thought we lost it with the Spice Girls, like Tween girls went over the edge with MMMBop, with Hanson. I mean, the Hanson mania was so intense. It set off this whole like chain reaction of changes in pop culture in general, I feel like. Before Hanson, magazines like Tiger Beat, you know, those teen magazines that were just basically posters that we would stick on our walls, they were full of actors mostly. JTT, Devon Sawa, Andrew Keegan, like those 90s heartthrobs, but they were all actors. Then Hanson dropped MMMBop with that weird music video with the pansies or whatever. Do you remember? Look this video up. It's very strange. There's this giant flower that blooms in the music video, and then they're kind of just floating in the air with this flower in the background, like playing the drums and singing the chorus to MMMBop with this. I think it's a pansy. I don't know. It's a very weird music video, but I wasn't even a Hanson fan. But I remember that video so clearly because it took the world by storm, especially if you were around my age, if you were a tween or teen girl. I actually have a clear memory of sitting at my dining room table eating breakfast while that music video played on the big giant tube TV in the living room. I'm not kidding. I remember this so clearly. I'm pretty sure I was eating waffles. It was that important. And then fast forward to the next year, 1998, and my friends and I had been just completely overtaken with boy band fever. We had it bad. We had come down with the fever and we were unwell. The Backstreet Boys were in full force popularity, and NSYNC had come on the scene with the total banger, I Want You Back, another one that I kind of forgot about, but an excellent song. But in those days, you had to choose a side. You had to declare your loyalty to one or the other, and this was important. This was kind of like choosing your identity, okay? I was a Backstreet Boys girly, and I have a theory about this. And my theory is that it just all comes down to my age, my specific age at this specific time in history. Backstreet Boys came first. They really became extremely popular just slightly before NSYNC. So I think I was just at that age where I was interested in boy bands right when the Backstreet Boys started getting popular. It was right before NSYNC came out. So by the time NSYNC really hit the scene, I was already fully immersed in the Backstreet Boys fandom. Because make no mistake, this was a fandom. I mean, sure, we were 12-year-old girls, but we were actually insane. I think girls really got into fights with their friends over Backstreet Boys versus NSYNC loyalties. I think at one point I actually had a sign on my door that said, Backstreet Boys fans only, no NSUck fans. We really loved to refer to NSYNC as NSUck. We thought we were really clever with that. As if their music wasn't, I mean, basically indecipherable from one another. They sound almost exactly the same. They were created by the same people. I mean, they're the same band, just with a different name and different faces. But somehow this became my whole identity. It became a lot of people's whole identities. And if you lived through this, you know that I'm not exaggerating. This was a really big deal. In 1996, our identity was, which Spice Girl are you? In 1998, it was, are you a Backstreet Boys fan or are you an NSYNC fan? You had to choose. And one thing that I always find really amazing when I think back on these times is how quickly our obsessions faded and how these really short periods of time felt really long when we were kids. And I think that this is just a phenomenon with time and age. Like, things just feel more significant when you're younger. But by the time we got to 1999, I know I was also listening to NSYNC too, definitely by 2000, because I loved the entire No Strings Attached album. So all of this happened pretty quickly. I mean, I'm pretty sure Justin Timberlake's first solo album, Justified, came out in 2002. I mean, isn't that crazy? This happened all so quickly. But in 1998, my tween girl world really revolved around boy bands, specifically the Backstreet Boys. In 1998, I was in 5th and 6th grade. So 98 would have been the end of my 5th grade and the beginning of my 6th grade years. So this is peak cringe age. I mean, you can't get much worse than that age. Braces, bad skin, bangs that I curled like a big loop in my forehead and kind of pulled apart. We printed out AIM conversations, just the whole thing. So again, I was the prime target for this obsession. And then, if it couldn't get any bigger, if this obsession could not get any more extreme, in September of 1998, we got TRL. True story. My best friend and I, in probably 1998, we told everybody in my class that I was originally, air quotes, originally from Orlando. I moved to my small town in 2nd grade, but I moved from 20 minutes away in Minnesota, definitely not from Florida. But we told everybody that I was originally from Orlando and that Carson Daly was my cousin. Never mind that Carson Daly is from Santa Monica and TRL filmed in Times Square in New York City, and none of that had anything to do with Orlando, but we just picked that because the Backstreet Boys were in Orlando. And we told everybody this in my class. See what I mean? I mean, just peak cringe age. So you can imagine that this age of weird obsessions and, not really having anything else to do, but feeling like you were somehow on the cusp of being a grown-up would lead to just unhealthy levels of obsessions over something like the Backstreet Boys. So of course, as expected, when TRL came out, it truly became the center of the tween girl universe. TRL was like the Hailey Bieber for tween girls in 1998. It set the trends. It was the tastemaker. It was the one to watch. You could not miss it. We watched it so faithfully every single day, even though it was basically the same thing every single day. If you're too young to have experienced the TRL golden years, or if you've just forgotten, TRL was essentially a music video countdown show where they would count down the day's top 10, I think, most popular music videos. And I'm not really sure how people voted on these, probably some sort of primitive online thing, but most likely it was happening via telephone. You had to call, like the early days of American Idol, where you had to call an 800 number to vote for the music video. Anyway, technically it was a music video show, but this was kind of in this transitional time for MTV where I don't think people really cared about music videos that much anymore. They were starting to dip their toes into other programming. So TRL was kind of a blend between like music videos, which was MTV's bread and butter, obviously, and something like MTV Spring Break, where you just had people talking about pop culture and like interviewing celebrities. And they'd only show a few seconds of each video, and then they'd cut back to the studio where the audience would just scream, and Carson would talk to very important celebrity guests. This was really probably the most exciting part of the show. There was always guests on the show. If you want a serious nostalgia hit, Google TRL photo booth and just scroll through the image results. I swear, I got a little emotional, honestly, looking at the pictures of like baby Britney and bleach blonde Eminem and people like Heath Ledger and Paul Walker and like Destiny's Child as a group. I feel like they were on TRL all the time, so Google that. So it was really a celebrity-driven show that was kind of under the disguise of being about music, which, I mean, now that I say that, that's pretty much completely what MTV was in that whole era. It was all about celebrities. Even the VJs were celebrities in their own right, and Carson, the host, became this huge celebrity with TRL, and cast members of shows like The Real World became kind of their own type of celebrity. And then, of course, the music artists themselves were huge celebrities. And we watched as much, if not even more so, for the content about the people, about the celebrities. We were looking for information about the music artists' personal lives. You know, we wanted to know what they wore to the VMAs and what they kept in the refrigerators, which we could find out because of MTV Cribs. And it wasn't even that much about the music. It was about this whole experience of pop culture that came from this music. And to me, TRL was really kind of the beginning of that whole era on MTV that was just like reality shows and celebrity. The celebrity-driven era, really, of MTV. But on a surface level, at least, TRL was a top 10 video countdown show, and it was about this music. But I feel like it was always kind of the same songs, and we watched it really faithfully, even though it was always the same songs, or at least that was my memory of it. So I did some Googling to see if my memories were correct. From the time TRL premiered, which was in September 1998, up until February 25th of 1999, so 6 full months, every single number one video on TRL was either Backstreet Boys or NSYNC. And a lot of the times it just went back and forth. So for the first few weeks, it alternated between I'll Never Break Your Heart by Backstreet Boys and Tearing Up My Heart by NSYNC. They even have Heart. But I mean, I had to really think about which band sang each of those songs because it could go either way. But it alternated between those two every other week. Then All I Have to Give by Backstreet Boys, I think, entered the chat in November. And God Must Have Spent a Little More Time on You, which I know is NSYNC. And then those two songs just alternated. And it kind of just continued on this pattern of just a Backstreet NSYNC battle. And do you know what knocked them both out of this number one streak on TRL? I need to pause for a second just to let you all guess, okay? Backstreet Boys and NSYNC are battling out on TRL for the number one spot week after week for 6 months straight. Who's the band that knocked them out and got the number one spot? Freaking Korn. Freak on a Leash. What a wild time in music. We had boy bands and bubblegum pop, and then we had Korn and Limp Bizkit. And they were all under the umbrella of pop music. I mean, they were all on TRL. And for me, at least, from late 1998 until at least 2000, maybe early 2001, TRL ruled my afternoons. I remember it was on right after school, so you'd have to run home to watch TRL. And you never knew what was going to happen on TRL or who was going to show up. These were the days before social media. So you weren't going to see a celebrity post something on their Instagram story or their TikTok being like, hey guys, I'm going to be on TRL this afternoon. We're going to talk about this, this, and this. Like, catch you there. No, you had to tune in every single day. This was the daily show to see what was going to go down. The most exciting thing was just watching the crowd. I mean, when I say that we were crazy fans in the boy band era, I think this was a universal thing amongst teen girls because when I watched TRL, all I saw were screaming girls. I mean, 99% of them were screaming teenage girls. And the boy band era, it almost encouraged young girls to be as extreme of fans as possible. The entire kind of climate of pop culture and the media really encouraged this behavior. And I'm sure it's because these companies and these brands and these networks like MTV saw dollar signs when they looked at this demographic of teenage girls who just had these like violent obsessions with these celebrities. And these were the early days of the really extreme paparazzi and tabloid era that the 2000s really became. But the screaming fans and these giant crowds that would form in Times Square, of all places, outside the TRL office. And they'd hold up signs and they would just scream their faces off and try to get called up into the studio. I mean, this was part of the spectacle of the show. And over time, I feel like it really became kind of a focus of the show. They would have a quick clip of Carson in the studio, and then they would pan down into the window and they would show the street below, and it would just be these massive crowds of kids screaming outside the window. And the show happened right after school. So I would imagine if these kids were in high school, they had to book it from wherever their high school was to try to get to Times Square with their big cardboard sign to try to get inside. And then the studio audience, which I guess were the kids that were somehow selected from the screaming mass of, you know, teenage raging hormones on the street to be able to come upstairs, they would just scream the entire time. They would do this thing where they would let people give shout outs, and it would show up in a little box during the actual video. So you'd be watching, you know, a Backstreet Boys music video, and then there'd be a little picture-in-picture of some screaming teenager, and they'd be trying to get their little shout out to, you know, their mom or their friends or whatever, and they wouldn't even be able to get through it. They would just turn into this hysterical screaming puddle. I mean, it was a spectacle. It was really, really crazy to watch. So it was a show about the fans as much as it was about the music, about the celebrity. It was a show for fans, and it was about the fans. And it was really encouraging this like crazy fandom behavior that so many of us were participating in, because we could look at these girls like melting into a puddle, screaming on the street of Manhattan in Times Square, and think like, okay, I guess it's not that weird that I pretend that I'm Nick Carter's girlfriend in AOL chat rooms. That's weird behavior. But this was also normalized. And I think it TRL and kind of the spectacle that it made of these screaming girls, these screaming teenage girl fans, really kind of sums up that entire era of the early to mid 2000s where we were just celebrity obsessed. When I think to the Mick Bling years, you know, those early to mid 2000s years, celebrities were so important to everything, and to the point where it was abusive to them for sure, and the paparazzi and things were just really out of control. We were obsessed with being fans. We were obsessed with the bands, sure, in the boy bands era. I mean, the Backstreet Boys were my entire personality, and then it was Britney Spears and so on and so on. We were obsessed with MTV, whatever, but we were also obsessed with being fans. We were obsessed with that becoming a part of our identity. Are you a Britney girl? Or are you a Christina girl? Are you Backstreet Boys? Or are you NSYNC? Or are you 98 Degrees? You're a little bit different. You want to go for the underdog, whatever. It was like an identifier. And when you think about it, that's genius marketing for a network like MTV or anybody really trying to make money off of this younger demographic. And TRL really solidified that whole idea that our loyalties to whatever fandoms you were part of were core parts of your identity. And that was totally okay, totally normal. And of course, this translated to us, or our parents really, just spending a ridiculous amount of money on everything from CDs to merch, t-shirts, concert tickets, posters. I mean, I had it all. I had the Backstreet Boys behind the scenes, you know, air quotes, all access VHS tape that would show behind the scenes concert footage. I had posters. But it really was an amazing time, and I do think that there was something really teen driven to pop culture at the time. And I think even now when I look back at Y2K and I think back to Y2K, I was a tween, but even the fashion and kind of the feel of pop culture of that time feels very young. It feels very youthful, very playful. I've said that before. Playful is a word that kind of comes to mind often when I think of Y2K. It was very, very teen driven, very teen focused. And then of course the boy band bubble kind of burst. I guess after Y2K, I think in 2000, I was definitely still listening to boy bands. I loved NSYNC. Like I said, I love the No Strings Attached album. But I think by 2001, I feel like there was a shift. A lot of solo female singers were big around that time. Like, that's an era that I think of Britney Spears and Jessica Simpson and Christina. J-Lo was huge around that time. And then artists like Blue Cantrell and Willa Ford, kind of these female solo artists. And then a lot more hip-hop. I feel like hip-hop and R&B kind of took over my small town high school by 2001, so that's saying something. It probably was much bigger. before that, but it trickled down to us. By 2001, we were listening to, you know, Ashanti and Ja Rule and Jagged Edge and Missy Elliott, Eve, whatever. So things changed, and that boy band era kind of was over pretty much as quickly as it started. But in honor of the TRL glory days, I'm going to wrap this up by sharing my top 5 music videos, not just songs, but music videos specifically of the Y2K TRL days. Number 5 is The Boy Is Mine by Brandy and Monica. This is from 1998, so this is a very early TRL hit. I can still picture this video vividly. It's like a lot of jewel tones and like gold metallics. They're in this extremely 1998 apartment or house or something, kind of going from room to room, and they're on opposite sides of a wall singing. And in one of the outfit changes, Monica, I think it's Monica, has a gold armband on her bicep. Oh, they both looked so good in this video. I remember thinking that their looks, like their whole looks, everything about them, their outfits, everything was the peak of sophistication. I loved it. Number 4 is the Bum Bum song by Tom Green. Yes, this was actually on TRL, and it was actually number 1 on August 27th, 1999. It was number 1 on TRL. If you don't remember this, or if you're just unfamiliar with this entirely, please do yourself a favor and look this up. The Bum Bum song by Tom Green. And just know that this was popular culture in 1999. Okay, this was the real Y2K. Number 3, Bye 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 by NSYNC. This music video is iconic. What can I say? Everything about it is iconic. Obviously, the guys with marionettes, with the girl holding the strings. But then there's also these parts where they're on top of I think it's a train or a bus. They're on top of some sort of moving vehicle for some reason. And then there's all of these clips where they're dancing in this very, very Y2K kind of like bluish lit room. And they're like leaning to the sides, and then they're on the ceiling upside down. And it is just amazing. Everything about this video screams Y2K. It's perfect. No notes. Number 2, Lucky by Britney Spears. You guys, Britney singing on top of that billboard with her piecey, kind of subtly flipped out hair. This song was my entire identity, my entire life when it came out. It came out in the summer of 2000. I don't know why I still remember it was the summer. It literally takes me back in time when I hear it. And the music video is perfect. Britney in her kind of old Hollywood look, standing on that balcony looking sad. So good. And number 1, none other than I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys from 1999, from the iconic Millennium album. This video was obviously retired from TRL because it was number 1 for so freaking long. I still have clear memories of watching this video on TRL after school and middle school. And I remember having conversations with my friends being like, how long do you think it's going to be number 1? Like, when do you think it's going to be knocked out? Or do you think it's just going to get retired? And it got retired. I saw the Backstreet Boys Millennium Tour in Minneapolis in middle school. And I think I actually cried during this song. I was so obsessed with it. Come to think about it, if you don't remember this video, it's basically the music video version of TRL. It's just about the fans. Essentially, it's like them singing to the fans. It's just weird transitions between them standing in front of, I assume their private jet, their PJ, in like Matrix coats, and then a weird transition to a random dance break, and then weird transition to just shots of screaming fans. That's it. But it was Y2K perfection. Everything about it. It defines the TRL era for me. If any of those music videos that I listed you haven't seen, that is your homework. Go look them up. Have a nice little trip back in time. You will not regret it, I promise. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I'll have to do an episode specifically on MTV in the 2000s another time, because there is so much to talk about there, especially with the reality shows that came out in the early 2000s. But if you did enjoy this episode, please share it with a friend who you think might also enjoy it. That really means so much to me. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. I will be back next week. Until then, see you later. Bye.